Welcome to Leadership Explored, the podcast where we dive into what it really means to lead in today's world. I'm Ed Schaefer, joined as always by my co-host Andy Siegmund. At some point in your career, someone probably said it to you, or you said it yourself. Don't bring me problems, bring me solutions. It sounds sharp, decisive, like the kind of thing a confident leader says. And for about 10 seconds, it feels great. Then the complaints stop coming, and you think, great, things must be getting better. Except they're not. They're just going underground. The people closest to the work, the ones who actually see what's breaking, have learned that the cost of speaking up is too high, so they go quiet. And now you're leading blind. Today, we're talking about complaints. Not therapy session venting, not HR grievances, the everyday operational gripes that move through a team. We're going to make the case that those complaints are leadership data, not leadership problems. And we're going to lay out a directional model that most organizations get completely backwards. Complaints should move up, support should move down, and the leader who gets that flow right has a serious advantage. We'll also get real about the other failure mode, the person on the team who only ever complains, brings no directional thinking, and slowly poisons the well. That is a real thing, and we're not going to skip past it. So Andy, I want to start right at the phrase, don't bring me problems, bring me solutions. Have you ever actually said that to someone, and what were you hoping for when you said it?
So I haven't said it in the context that you're alluding to, which is I think kind of a bit of a toxic cop-out in some ways. And I want to parse this out, Ed, because I think that it's very easy to kind of dunk on this phrase and be like, this is a dumb thing to say because it's going to choke off the information, the value information flow as a leader, and you're going to become disaffected or disconnected from what's going to go on. And for the second time in a row, I'll reference the Silicon Valley thing where the boots on the ground developing the application are talking about how delayed things are, and they won't tell the project managers, who won't tell the directors, who won't tell the CEO, right? This don't bring me complaints, bring me solutions is excellent career advice for somebody. If you want to grow in your career, right? If you see a problem, come to your leadership with the problem and some potential solutions, or a way that you can potentially own that problem. And that's a great way to accelerate your career, right? There's not a leader out there in the world, certainly not one that you want to work with. I'm sure there are some out there who will not appreciate this, right? The thing I love the most as a people leader is when somebody identifies a problem and has a partially to fully baked solution to that problem. And I can say, great, that sounds like an awesome idea. Go implement this. What do I need to unblock for you to get into that? Do you need my sponsorship? Do you need, some labor? Do you need influence from somewhere else? Let's go fix this thing. The other way, it just like you said, right? It feels like this decisive, hard charging thing where you're empowering your team to be like, well, don't bring me complaints, bring me solutions. And as I said, useful in a career coaching thing. But when you frame it that way, people don't want to bring things up, especially if they don't have a solution. Realistically, you're probably only going to have a useful idea for 50% of the things that can be fixed. Some are just going to be institutional or bureaucratic things that are annoying, that you don't know the full reason that they exist. It inhibits communication. It slows things down. It's a poor tack. I would not recommend doing it. I've never said it directly in the way that you're alluding to. I have had multiple conversations where I've said, well, that's valid. What would you do about that? Or, hey, so-and-so, I noticed you're really good at identifying problems in the org. If you want to continue to grow, the best next step is the next time you bring me one, come with some thoughts on how we might be able to fix that, and then let's work together on that, right? But that's an opening the door gesture of hey, let's partner on this. I want you to start thinking beyond first order consequences here.
Yeah. I mean, I don't know that I've ever said it to anyone. There's definitely been times when I've thought it and kind of wanted to say it, but in those contexts, it was really a situation where there was lots of complaining, like like the kind of low level complaining that's not really useful or valuable, just kind of grumbling about stuff all of the time, and it kind of
I'm
brings
reminded
the
of like the grump and dump retro, which is like
yeah.
useful sometimes. It's like get everything off your chest, but it accomplishes nothing other than like some shared misery.
Yeah. So I think the impulse behind that saying is real and somewhat legitimate, because as a leader, you don't want to be dumped on. And if the same people are coming to you over and over again with just the exact same complaints, and they're never trying to move anything forward or find potential solutions, especially if they're closer to the work, and they might be able to come up with solutions or ideas that you as the leader aren't even able to see, then then certainly I would prefer them to bring me some solutions if possible. And I think there is genuine value in coaching people to think through problems before escalating, and trying to come up with like, well, what might you do, or what might be a potential solution for this. I think that aspect of it is somewhat defensible, and I think the natural response of wanting to do that in some cases makes sense. But the problem is the phrase doesn't teach problem solving, right? It just acts as a filter. And what it filters out isn't the laziness, which is I think what a lot of leaders who would say that, and I've heard leaders say that before. I've seen it even like written on LinkedIn posts and stuff like that. And
Mhm.
I think in their mind they're going, these people are just lazy and they don't want to come up with a solution. They just want to complain about all of these problems. When you do that, though, you filter out the people who can see something is wrong, but maybe they can't see what the path forward is. And sometimes, as the leader, I think a lot of times as the leader, when you have more experience and more time behind you, maybe more company knowledge, I think it is your responsibility to come up with solutions, or realistic or viable solutions, that help with that path forward. And if they can't see the path forward, but they feel the pain, then I think that is a really important signal for them to be raising by bringing up those complaints. And if a complaint comes up over and over again and never gets addressed, that to me implies there's something systemic or systematic that's going on that needs to be addressed in the organization. And there's this dynamic in organizations called the iceberg of ignorance. Research shows that only a small fraction of frontline problems ever reach senior leadership in normal circumstances. So if you're as a leader, if your method is saying bring solutions as a mandate, it actually makes the iceberg even larger, because now you have more stuff that's sitting below the surface that nobody wants to bring up, because people start to think to themselves, well, if I can't see a solution, I'm not going to bring it to my boss, because they don't want to hear complaints. They only want to hear solutions. And then now it's quiet, and the leaders go, oh, that means things must be good, things must be healthy. But silence isn't health. It's the more silence there is, the more of what's hidden, right? And I think
Mhm.
this kind of ties into some of the, I think we've talked about some of these things before, but like in Toyota factory line, they have the Andon cord that they can pull it and stop the line. And when they do, anybody can stop the line, and all of the line managers will basically swarm onto that one spot to find out what the problem was. And everybody works to address it as soon as possible. I know there was research about healthcare, and it found that in the environments where they didn't speak up, or like the nurses didn't tell the doctor something was wrong or they were doing the wrong thing, there was way worse outcomes. They had more, wrong issues, or wrong
Yeah,
medications or
the morbidity
problems.
rate increases pretty significantly. Yeah.
Yeah, so all of those indicate like silence is a problem, and not being silent is really the move that we really want. So I guess, Andy, when you've worked with other leaders and executives on these types of concepts and thinking, do you think that they realize they're actually cutting off information by saying something like that? Or do you think that folks who say that genuinely think they're building capability in their people?
Um, and I think most like I like to take the tack that most folks are doing things out of positive intent, right? And that's kind of why I wanted to highlight a little bit earlier, right? Is like I think that there's a really effective way to communicate, like, hey, bring me solutions, as opposed to just issues. Um, and I think that that's broadly good career advice. Like that's a hill I'm willing to die on, Ed. Um, I think it can often be a little bit of a cop out. Um, it could be a little bit of a filter because like deliberately, but I think it's not always well applied, or like it ends up filtering out far more than you intend. And
Yeah.
the reason I think it's a useful filter is like every job has stuff that you're going to complain about. It's got processes that you don't like. It's got bureaucracy that you don't like. And I'm not advocating for not inspecting why we do those things, but the vast majority of those were implemented for good reason. And if removed, would harm the business in various ways. And the don't bring me problems, bring me solutions does filter out a lot of those things that are just like immutable parts of the job. And I think oftentimes that can be the intent, right? Like we both work in professional services consulting roles, and like there's always complaints about time cards and time card entry, right? I've historically always spent so much time chasing time cards, and there are better time card systems and there are worse time card systems, but the necessity of logging time in an organization that charges its clients for billable hours is immutable, right? So like the don't bring me complaints, bring me solutions, like yeah, I mean, if you're logging in 1 minute increments, like that's probably like there's a solution to that. It's don't log in 1 minute increments, right? But the solution is not don't log your time, right? So it can filter out some of just the malarkey there. But I think oftentimes, like when you start to pre-filter, what you end up doing is you are trying to separate noise and obtain signal, and you end up catching signal. And like part of your role as a leader is to have the discernment and to separate signal from noise. Like you are the filter. You should put as few filters in front of you as you can get away with. And you need to be building relationships so that you don't get like a very filtered, watered down version of things.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think a lot of times, like you were saying, when people say that the intent is capability building, right? They want to say, hey, think through this and consider it more and maybe come up with some potential options that we could consider and move forward. But a lot of times the execution and delivery of that language just comes off as don't bother me. And I think that lands really differently. And
Yeah.
I think there's also like some hidden assumptions with it. Like one of them is that there's almost an assumption that the employee should already know what the solution is. But if they knew what the solution was, maybe the problem wouldn't even exist in the first place. And especially when you're talking
Yeah.
like a new employee or a frontline worker or someone with no budget authority or authority of any kind, really, they may see the friction clearly but have no ability to fix it. And telling them to come back with answers winds up being just a gate instead of actually coaching them to get better at their job or to grow into their role.
Yeah. And one of the things too is like one of the better ways that I've seen this implemented broadly is like, and you see this a lot like on solid leadership teams where like I've seen this a bunch of times on various leadership team meetings that I've been on where one of my peers or myself will highlight an issue like, hey, we're having a whole lot of trouble with XYZ, or ABC is not working the way that it's designed. And the leader's response to that is like, great, why don't you take lead on fixing that? So you don't necessarily need to like you can, if you're the complainer, right? Like you see with really high functioning teams, the conversation, it's less like, it's not Ed, this is broken. It's Ed, this is broken. Cool if I go try to figure out how to fix it, right? Like it's not me coming to you with the solution already broken or like already preformed. It's me coming to you saying like, "Hey, I'm highlighting this thing. I'm not sure if you're aware about this." And then in the same breath, I'm volunteering to take ownership of making it better, right? And I think that's a model that you see a lot at really high functioning teams. and is something that you should, look to see, like, is that how things are happening in your organization? Like, are people taking ownership of the stuff that they find? Do they have the authority to go and fix the thing? Can they pull the Andon cord? Can they, change things on the assembly line to make things more efficient? Or are they told, like, no, this is the way we always do it? Buzz off.
Yeah. Yeah, I guess it's an empowerment thing. It's like the difference between saying, "Hey, you're empowered," and actually in that case they bring in the complaint and saying to them, "Well, if you want to go ahead and try to fix this, or you have my support, I'll back you up, or if we want to work through it together." I think that is real empowerment. And that's like the healthy version of this, where the more dangerous version is leaders applying this consistently and always saying, "Well, don't bring me problems, bring me solutions." And then it leads to the teams learning to suppress complaints rather than escalating them. And then we get into the problem like we talked about a number of episodes ago, where you have like watermelon projects where things are reporting
Mhm.
green on the outside where they're red on the inside. And I think things like that are almost always a downstream effect of complaint suppression at the leadership level.
Yeah, 100%.
So I think this takes us to the other direction. If this filter, if saying don't bring me problems, bring me solutions is wrong, what's the right framing? And I think it comes down to the direction. Um, and really, when we think about organizations, a lot of people think about the org chart and they go, oh well, the CEO's at the top and the lowly call center employee is at the very very bottom of the org chart. But there's a structural principle in servant leadership that I think more leaders should be practicing and operating from, which is the inverted pyramid idea, right? It's the idea that the organization exists to support the front line, not the other way around. So the org chart should actually be viewed upside down. The CEO's job is to support the leaders who, in our traditional mindset would be directly below him, but in the inverted one, they'd be directly above him. And you work your way all the way up to where it's like you've got your lowest paid employee and their boss is standing beneath them, supporting them, essentially holding them up.
Mhm.
And so the leader's job is to remove friction, clear obstacles, and make sure that the people closest to the work have the resources and knowledge and information they need to be successful. And if that's true structurally, then there's only one direction that complaints can go, right? One natural direction, which is they go up in a traditional org chart. I guess in this upside down one, they would
Mhm.
finally
It would
trickle
go
down.
down, but yeah, let's let's stick with the traditional for the sake
Yeah, but
sake of
since everybody's
simplicity.
used
But
to the
yeah.
traditional one, the complaints need to go up. The person who's doing the work surfaces what's broken. They take it to the leader above them. That leader takes that signal seriously and tries to work on it. Or if they can't, then they surface it further up, and just keep flowing up. So it should be, traditional model support should flow down and complaints should flow up. How does that
Mhm.
resonate with you?
Yeah, and that, like, yeah, I love that. I, every time I think about this, I'm always reminded of it's a scene in Saving Private Ryan, right? So it's Captain Miller, who's Tom Hanks's character, and they're, walking across the French countryside, I think, right, or German countryside, and they're, the rank and file are like complaining about the mission that they've been sent on, and they ask him, like, Captain, don't you have any complaints? And he looks them right in the eye and he goes, gripes go up, right? And he says, like, you complain to me, I complain to my superior officer, he complains to his superior officer, right? And then they try to get him to complain, like, well, if I was the major, what would you say to me? And his response is, I would say to you, sir, this is a very fine mission. And he goes on to just kind of say that because he's in front of his staff, right? And and the reason that this is critical is, like, look, you have to maintain that line of communication. You have to maintain that transparency moving up to the levels where you can impact change. But also, as a leader, you're responsible for morale, right? So if you're going to dunk on some process or something that's happening that you're not actively in the process of changing, or you're not, like, building a coalition to change, then all you're doing is you're reducing the morale of your team, right? So a much better way to go about it is to, like, share the context with your organization of why we do it this way, right? Start, some of the Simon Sinek, like, start with why sort of stuff. And that's, like, that's how you then support it, and you try to give people the understanding of like, oh, we have to do XYZ because of this, right? Like a very, very simple thing is like, if you are in the if you're a police officer, you're in the armed forces, right? People think that shaving is a manner of just like uniformity and conformity, but it's also because that's the only way that you get a hard seal on your gas mask, right? Like there's like like distinct practical application for that, right? You never see beards in the fire department because it's literally unsafe when you need to get oxygen, right? um Being able to explain things at those levels helps build support for the thing that otherwise, folks would be complaining about. So like, it- it's worth thinking about that sort of stuff. It's like, it's very easy to be like, oh yeah, I'm gonna get in on this like grump session, and like, you either need to turn it around, or you need to let your staff complain with you outside of the room. Sometimes, like, sometimes they just need to vent, and like sometimes your best move is just not be there so that they can vent about you as well.
Yeah. Yeah. So what are we saying? We're saying gripes go up, support flows down. And there are two failure modes that I've seen that break this model, and they're both pretty toxic, I think. One of them is the downward venting one, where leaders complain to their directs about things above them. That one's pretty visible, and I've been on the receiving end of that before, and it definitely gave me a different. Sometimes it can build some camaraderie or whatever, but a lot of times it just kind of make
Short lived.
yeah, and it makes that leader not look as thoughtful or considerate, and it's also kind of like, well, why are you complaining to me about this? You're my boss. Like I'm not in a position to do anything about this. So
it
th-
it undermines their authority. It under like it's like it's like when you were a teenager, everyone like had that friend whose parents were more of a friend than a parent, right? And you always like, you thought they were cool for like a little bit, and then you were like, why don't I respect Mr. and Mrs. So and so the way and like you start to realize like, oh yeah, it's because like they want to hang out with us, and that's weird. They should hang out with people their own age, right? Like it's just that scaled at like the corporate level.
yeah, yeah. So that's the visible one, and then the other one that I think about is an invisible one, which is the leader who just sits on complaints and never surfaces them upwards. I guess I'm curious, have you ever seen that or experienced that, and what do you think it looks like to outsiders who are not inside of that leader's mind?
Yeah, I think that erodes trust too. And I'll put that in with like a little bit of a caveat, like well-known complaints that cannot be resolved, or that like not everything can be fixed, or not everything should be fixed or changed. Like there's always going to be stuff that people complain about in various roles, and like some of them are just like, them's the breaks, right?
Yeah, how
I
many
don't think it's
people
worth.
you buy Jira or whatever, and there's always going to be a contingent of people who are like, I don't want to use Word, I don't want to use Jira or whatever, and it's like, well, we just spent all this time and money investing in bringing the software in, like that complaint's not going to go anywhere.
Yeah, exactly. So like those are not worth stuff like surfacing, right? Like as I said kind of earlier in this conversation, you are the filter. Um it's also like, to a certain extent, you have to separate signal from noise. Like, is this Ed's complaint, or is this like more organizational thing, right? Because like as a leader, your responsibility is to the organization, not necessarily to the individual. So like I might look for a way to relieve your acute pain, but like if you're the only one who's got a gripe about this thing, like that's a you problem, not a we problem, right? And that's like, there's different mechanisms for that. I think that like the leaders who don't surface those complaints, you end up kind of, it ends up being a house of cards after a while, right? Things don't improve. There ends up being some kind of weird stuff going on. Employee sat goes down, or you see like people looking to get off of so and so's team. Like you see this happen in a lot of different ways, right? Attrition, like regrettable attrition, goes up. Whether that's leaving the org or like org entirely, or just like leaving that particular practice. I think that there's always sorts of tells. I don't think it's a good look to not work on the things that are especially macro level issues, or to just kind of brush them under the rug. I worked for a leader who just like would say things are changing, or this is getting better, or this is happening, or that's happening, and then the next time you talk to me, he would like not acknowledge that he said that, right? And like that just like really erodes trust, and makes things really challenging for everyone in the group. And in that particular group, like you saw a lot of folks kind of look for the exits pretty. Yeah, after working for him for a certain amount of time, you could see that like, oh yeah, like you work for this guy for about 18 months, and everyone kind of wants out. And that's because of that, like just sort of like lack of truthiness, and like lack of things happening to like make your lives better, make your jobs easier. And a lot of just like, well, this is what it is. Like, you just got to go do this. So,
Yeah. Yeah, and I think when a leader sits on it, they, like you were saying, they usually have a reason that seems reasonable to them, or at least they think it's reasonable. Maybe they're protecting the team, or they don't want to escalate prematurely, or maybe they think they can handle it themselves. But I think part of the problem with that reasoning, and you had said if only one person comes with the complaint, it might be a them problem. It may be, but I think it's also, if one person brings a complaint, it's almost never just that person's complaint. It's kind of that thing about being in a classroom where you would say, well, if you have a question, you should ask the question. Because if you have the question, probably other people in the class have the question too, and they're just not willing to bring it up. And I think that's definitely true in my own experience. The number of times that there's been some frustration at work, and everybody is frustrated about it, but nobody is saying anything, and they're waiting to see if
mhm.
anybody else will raise it. And I think sometimes I take it upon myself to be like, look, I'm just going to complain about this thing, or I'm going to bring the problem up. So I think everyone does that. And if one person walks into your office is representing a larger silent population, then sitting on that complaint for too long could be a disservice to the whole organization and not protecting it. So I
Mhm.
think the directional rule is really important, right? Complaints should go up, support can go down. Anytime that venting is going downwards, especially like a leader complaining to their team about decisions above them, or I used to think about this too. Sometimes people would come and they'd complain about their team, and it's like, well, your job is supposed to be to like form the team or bring the team along or help them succeed. So like, do you just hate your team? Why are you complaining about them so much?
Mhm.
So I think it's really important to avoid having that leadership failure of complaining down, because it creates anxiety without urgency. And when you do that as a leader, what is the team going to do about it? They can't do anything other than like, oh man, I wasn't happy. My boss isn't happy either. Like, maybe I don't want to be here anymore. Maybe this is even worse than I thought. So I think there's some real, negative directional stuff. But I want to be fair to the other side of this pattern as well, because there is a failure mode on the other side. And I think we would be naive if we didn't acknowledge that there is a real archetype on a lot of teams where there is a person who brings complaints constantly and consistently with a lot of energy, and they might interrupt other things. They might bring it up even when it's inappropriate or whatever, but they never have any like generative motion attached to it. They're never trying to make things better or actually do
Mhm.
anything about the problem. It's it's just to bring up problems. Every meeting has a problem. Every plan has a flaw. And then when you ask them, well, what might you do differently, or how could we avoid that problem? The answer is just like a shrug or another complaint about something else. And I looked into this a little bit. There is research on this, and it's chronic complaining without resolution. And it's not just a culture problem. It's actually a lot of times it could be a neurological problem. The brain will
Mhm.
reinforce the pathways that it uses the most. So if we practice rehearsing grievances over and over and over again, and if we practice those negative thoughts and complaining without moving towards resolution, you can literally train yourself and basically wire your brain into a negative or negativity default, and that pattern can spread. And emotional contagion is really real. So somebody who's in that position, it can spread to the rest of the team. It can shift the tone and the attitude and the mood entirely. I'm not going to say that everyone who's a complainer is an asshole, but from some of the research, like the no asshole rule and stuff, there is a lot of evidence that just one negative person or one asshole in an organization, they have a direct impact on the people that they're being an asshole to, but also to all of the people around them who experience the fallout and the side effects of that.
Mhm.
So I think, that is a true problem to be aware of. I think that too many leaders, though, fall into thinking that people who complain are those chronic complainers, and that it's not as legitimate, especially the ones who are saying this, like, don't bring me complaints, bring me solutions, as opposed to recognizing that, like, most people, like you said, assume positive intent. Most people are going to surface those complaints and problems because they're feeling the pain in a real and visceral way, and they want some help and support with it. But there will be a small contingency of people who are just complaining for the sake of complaining. And there is a cost to the leader who absorbs that as well, right? Like, compassion fatigue is real. So and that's the
Mhm.
cognitive and emotional exhaustion that comes from sustained exposure to others' distress. This happens a lot with healthcare workers. They're around people who are struggling all of the time, and they can experience burnout at much higher rates. So any leader who's out there who just absorbs unchecked venting without any system for processing it will eventually start to go numb or become reactive, or that could push them more and more towards avoiding the people who need to be heard, or getting into that mentality of like, don't bring me complaints, bring me solutions. Because if you got a team of 10, if one person on that team is constantly complaining in a non-productive way, then it may fatigue you enough that you don't want to hear complaints from the other 9, even though the other 9 have like totally legitimate complaints and maybe even do come with solutions when they're working on it. So I think it's important to name it and be aware of this, and then try to build systems internally so that you can uh, parse and recognize the difference, and then also know how to respond to it so that it doesn't become overwhelming for you. So I guess I'm curious, have you ever had to manage a person like that, a chronic complainer? And without, if you want to walk through a situation, you can, but no names, of course. And what was your experience with that? Or if you haven't managed someone, have you seen that on any teams that you've been on or worked with?
Yeah, I mean, I feel like there's always one, right? Kind of everywhere you are, and I think it's like it's useful to have somebody who can see the holes
Oh
in
yeah.
everything, right? I think that that's a useful skill, but I think you have to be delicate or deliberate in, like, Amazon has this leadership principle called disagree and commit, right? And I think with the chronic complainer, that's an action that you need to execute far more frequently, right? Because, like, oftentimes, like, things aren't perfect. There's not an ideal way forward. What we're going to go with is the least bad way forward. And, like, you need, like, when dealing with that archetype, it's really critical that you get competent at having that conversation of like, look, I understand your concerns. However, these are the constraints that we're working under. So right now, I'm making the call that we're going to do X, Y, and Z. Like, put you in the risk log, right? Like it becomes kind of one of those things, right? Or if you think of like, um, you know, roaming risks, right? Like, this is just a thing that we have to accept here, right? To pull the A out of Rome. Um, and that's just kind of the way that you need to go about it. As far as like coaching them, like, I've had a few coaching conversations with folks who kind of fit this archetype. Um, it's one of those things where, like, the guidance I usually give is like, look, if you're going to bring things up, make sure you're framing things effectively, right? So if you like, there are certain risks that we're just going to have to accept to move forward on the project. It's helpful, like if you don't see any pathway to resolving the thing, or mitigating the thing, it's helpful if you preface it of like, look, I think this is probably something we just need to accept, but we need to make sure that everyone is aware of X, Y, and Z, right? That way, like they're not eroding the morale of the team and just kind of being a Debbie Downer. I find that when you coach things in that way, it can be pretty effective as far as like reframing that gripe. It doesn't always work. Sometimes you just have to be like, well, that's nice, and move on, which is less ideal, but it is what it is.
Yeah. Well, yeah, and you're pretty close to in line with what I was thinking. The fix can't be bring me solutions because that can silence people. So I think that it is, it's coaching and kind of trying to help them with reframing. So instead of don't bring me problems as a standard, I think the standard should be bring me the problem plus whatever your best thinking is on it, even if that thinking is rough, half baked, or wrong. And that's a completely different ask, right? Because it doesn't require that you have the answer. It requires that you have engaged with the problem directionally or from some different angles to think through it. I know that's something I try to do is I don't I don't always know what the real best solution is or what solutions might work inside of the constraints of our organization. But if I see a specific problem, like relatively recently, I brought up a problem in how sales and the account team is handing stuff off to delivery. And, I don't know what the right best solution is, but I had a couple of ideas of things that might be able to help, both in terms of why it's happening and then also what we could potentially do that might help move us in that direction. So when I shared with my boss, I said, well, here's what I see is happening. I don't exactly know why. Here's some of the thoughts I have on it. Maybe if we did this, or maybe if we did something like this, maybe some of these actions or activities, maybe if there was negative repercussions for them instead of the fallout happening to the people delivering the work. Here's some ideas of what might help. And I think that is really the best way to approach it, because when you coach people to come to you that way, then it really is a way that you grow people and grow their skills, right? Because I
Mm.
think the act of pairing a complaint with even a partial attempt at understanding the system around it or what's causing it, and then trying to come up with even a hypothetical or potential half solution starts to build more of that strategic thinking over time. And I think it also changes the complaint itself, because if someone has tried to think through a solution and hit a wall, then their complaint becomes more specific and more useful. And they could be more targeted in what kind of help they think they actually need, instead of this generic, like, well, this is really frustrating. Right. So I think
Yeah.
I think that changes how the leader receives it too. Because when I'm when I'm the leader of a team or working with people, and somebody brings me a rough solution alongside the complaint, then it tells me that they're engaged. They're not just complaining about the problem. They're actually thinking about what's going on. And it's not a threat. It's with the problem. It's an invitation that we can work together to think through the problem and come up with some ideas. And I think that's a very different conversation than just venting in one direction, whether it's up or down.
Yeah, wholeheartedly agree.
Yeah. Well, so what does this look like in practice if somebody wanted to do something with this week? I had 4 things that came to mind for me. First one is stop using bring me solutions as a complaint filter. If you catch yourself about to say that phrase, or maybe you've said it recently, recognize what it's actually doing. It's not building capability, it's raising the cost of speaking up. You might be screening out the most important information in your organization. So kill that filter and replace it with curiosity instead, right? Maybe like the Ted Lasso quote, don't be judgmental, be curious. Um, I guess it was the other way around, right? Be curious, not judgmental. I think that the more curiosity that we put in when somebody brings complaints, the better off that we can be, and the better we'll get towards those outcomes. The second thing I thought of was ask the representative grievance question. So if someone brings you a complaint, before you start to solve it, or before you escalate it, or before you react to it, ask them the question, who else do you think might be experiencing this? That way you can shift the conversation from it being a potentially just an individual frustration to more of an organizational signal. right? If only one person, if I'm saying this is bothering me, it might be harder to make a justification for a case to change the thing. But if I say this is bothering me and I know that it's impacting this whole department and slowing them down, then it starts to make a much clearer picture and case for needing to find some solution for that problem. I think it can help start moving the issue in the right direction without you having to manufacture a broader pattern yourself. The third thing I thought of was audit your directional flow. So pick a day and pay attention. Are you moving complaints upward or are they stopping at your desk? Is there anything sitting on your mental inbox that a person above you should know about and doesn't? Surface one of those things this week. Even if you do a brief email or a 2-minute mention would be enough to say that you are moving it instead of just sitting on it. And then the fourth thing I thought of was try the new standard out loud with your team. If chronic complaining without direction is a real dynamic that you're experiencing on your team, try naming this standard explicitly rather than reacting to it. So say something like, I want to hear the problem and I'd love your rough thinking on it, even if it's not fully baked. Say it in a team meeting or say it in the one-on-ones. Just put it on the table as the norm. So it's not a correction aimed at one person, but just to try to make that the behavior and the thing that everybody knows is the way we should behave on this particular team. So when you look at those four, do you think any particular one of those would be hardest for a leader to actually do? Or is there any that you think are best? And then is there anything you'd want to add?
Really love the representative grievance question, right? Anything that we can do to reframe and especially as a leader, right? Your job is to build a coalition, right? Your job is to build a coherent team, and it in sports, right? They say it's the name on the front, not the name on the back, right? And that's kind of what you're aiming for. And I think that representative grievance question really helps reinforce that philosophy and also helps individuals think like, is this a me thing or is this a broad systemic thing, right? So that they also get a little bit better at filtering, right? Is this a learning opportunity for me or is this a wall that everyone is budging into? Because then it helps them frame their questions better with you and helps you support them better in the future.
Yeah, that's awesome. Well, I think that's a great place for us to wrap up today. So here's what we came around to. Complaints are not the enemy. Silence is. A complaint you never hear is more dangerous than the one you handle badly, because at least with the one you hear, you have a chance to do something about it. The directional model is simple, but most organizations have it reversed. Complaints go up, support goes down. Venting downward is a leadership failure. Sitting on a complaint someone trusted you with is also a failure. It's just a quieter one that you don't see as often. And the chronic complainer problem is real, but the answer is not to shut the door, it's to raise the standard. Bring me the problem plus your rough thinking, and we'll work through this together. So here are your 2 challenges this week. First is a tactical one. Find one complaint that has landed on your desk and hasn't moved. Ask the representative grievance question. Who else is probably sitting on this? Then surface it upward. Do something with the signal you were given. Second, and this one's a little bit bigger picture, ask yourself honestly whether the people around you feel safe bringing you bad news. Not just the framed, solution-ready kind, the raw, I don't know how to fix this, but something is seriously wrong kind. If the answer is anything less than yes, it's worth sitting with and considering. Silence in an organization is almost never a sign of health. It's usually a sign that the cost of speaking has gotten too high. So if you don't think people around you feel safe bringing you bad news, maybe think about how you're bringing yourself to those interactions and how you might be able to adjust it so that people feel safer to bring you those problems, even if they don't have the solution. We'd love to hear where this lands for you. Have you ever worked for someone who genuinely made it safe to bring them a problem without a solution ready? Or have you ever caught yourself being the leader who didn't? Email us at leadershipexplored@gmail.com or find us on LinkedIn. We read everything you send. If this conversation was useful, please follow the show, leave a review, or send it to one person on your team who needs to hear it. We release new episodes every other Tuesday. Until next time, keep leading with purpose.